The twin suns of Varela burned the desert white, the air shimmering above the dunes like boiling glass. Somewhere beneath that endless sand, a weak heartbeat still struggled to continue. Asharin, an alien woman of pale silver skin and bright violet eyes, lay buried alive by her own family. Her tribe had called it mercy. But she knew better. It was fear. They feared her broken legs, her strange eyes that could see through lies. They said she brought bad luck, and so, before dawn, they whispered prayers and covered her in sand until her voice was gone. For hours she lay in darkness, her chest crushed, her thoughts fading like smoke. She could still hear their voices fading into the distance, promising that her spirit would join the stars. But Asharan did not want to join the stars. She wanted to live. Each breath came as fire. Each second stretched into forever. Somewhere above her, the wind moved the sand, and she prayed that someone, anyone, would hear her last cry miles away. A human scavenger named Ethan Cole guided his old hovercraft across the desert. He was tired, sunburned, and alone, collecting scraps of metal from abandoned battlefields. He had no mission, no home, only a habit of surviving one day at a time. When he stopped to check his radar for energy signals, he caught something faint, too faint to be a machine. It was rhythmic, soft, like a heartbeat. He frowned, thinking it was a sensor glitch, but something inside told him to check. He climbed down the ridge, boots sinking into the soft dunes. The wind howled past his ears, bringing with it a faint sound like someone gasping for air. He froze. Every instinct said to ignore it, to walk away. The desert was full of ghosts, sounds that played tricks on the living. But then he heard it again, weak but real. Help. The voice was fragile, broken, and filled with pain. Ethan dropped his bag and began to dig with his hands. Minutes turned into eternity. His gloves tore, his fingers bled, but he didn't stop. Then his hands struck something soft. A patch of pale skin glimmered beneath the sand. He cleared more, revealing a face half covered, cold and trembling. Her lips moved, barely whispering. "Don't leave me." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He had seen many strange things in this galaxy, but never something like this. A living woman buried like a relic. He lifted her out gently, brushing the sand from her silver hair. Her breathing was shallow, her pulse weak. He poured water on her lips and shielded her face from the twin suns. "You're safe now," he said quietly. Though he wasn't sure it was true, the desert stretched for miles, and his hovercraft was nearly out of power. But he couldn't leave her there with effort. He carried her to the craft and wrapped her in his old jacket. Her skin felt ice cold despite the heat. He could see old scars on her legs, marks of cruelty. "Who did this to you?" he asked softly, but she didn't answer. Only tears slipped down her cheeks, silent and shining. As the hovercraft moved across the dunes, Asharin drifted in and out of consciousness, her alien mind filled with flashes of memory hands pushing her down, voices saying she was cursed, the taste of sand in her mouth. But now there was a new voice, deep and calm. "Hold on," it said. "You're not dying today." She wanted to believe him. Even if she didn't know his name, they reached Ethan's outpost by nightfall, a lonely shelter built from scraps of old war machines. He laid her on his cot and turned on a dim lamp. Her eyes opened briefly, glowing faintly in the low light. She looked at him, this strange human covered in dust and scars, and for the first time in her life, she saw no fear in someone's eyes, only concern. He cleaned her wounds carefully, using what little medical supplies he had. When she tried to speak, he stopped her. "Don't talk," he said. "Save your strength." She watched him move around the room, his steps steady but quiet. She noticed the faded patches on his jacket, signs of old battles. He was a soldier once, she thought, someone who had seen death but still chose to save life. Outside, the desert wind whispered against the metal walls. Asharon closed her eyes, feeling the strange warmth of safety. For the first time since her family buried her, she didn't feel alone in her fading thoughts. She tried to understand why this human had saved her. Her people had told her humans were heartless scavengers, but this one had risked his life for her. Maybe mercy was not weakness after all. Maybe it was something stronger. As Ethan sat beside her, he looked at her sleeping face and felt something stir inside him. He didn't know who she was or why someone would bury her alive, but he knew one thing: she didn't deserve to die like that. He whispered quietly, "You're safe now, whoever you are." Outside, the stars shimmered above the dunes, and for the first time in years, Ethan Cole felt he might have found a reason to stay alive, too. The night deepened, the wind cooled, and in the silence between two broken souls, a fragile spark of trust began to form. Neither of them knew it yet, but the mercy that saved her tonight would soon awaken a storm that would change their world forever. When morning came, the sons of Varela rose like twin flames, casting golden light through the cracks in the metal shelter. Ethan sat near the bedside, his eyes half open. He had barely slept. Instead, he watched over the alien woman, wondering who she was and what kind of people could bury someone alive. Asharon stirred at last, her voice dry and soft. "Where am I?" she whispered. Ethan turned toward her with a calm smile. "Safe for now," he said. Offering her a cup of water, she drank slowly, her trembling hands showing both weakness and disbelief. He didn't ask questions at first. He only made sure she could sit up. He checked her wounds, replaced the makeshift bandages, and gave her some food from his rations. It wasn't much, just dried protein strips, but she ate as if it were a feast. After a few minutes, she finally spoke again. "Why did you save me?" she asked, her violet eyes studying him with suspicion. Ethan shrugged. "Because you were alive," he said simply. And that was reason enough. The words confused her. Her people believed that mercy was weakness, that survival came only through strength and obedience. But this human, this tired scavenger with sand in his hair and kindness in his voice, had risked his life to dig her out. "You don't even know me," she said quietly. "I didn't have to," Ethan replied. He poured more water into the cup and looked away. "Where I come from. Too many people died when no one cared to help, for hours." Silence filled the shelter. Asharon watched him move about, fixing small machines, checking solar panels, adjusting the hovercraft's engine. She noticed the limp in his right leg, the scars along his arms. Every line of his body spoke of a man who had seen war. Yet he treated her with care, speaking softly, never asking for anything in return. As the heat outside grew unbearable, Ethan stayed inside, telling her stories to distract her mind. He spoke of Earth, the blue planet long abandoned by its people, of oceans that could swallow cities, and forests that sang when the wind passed through. Asharon listened quietly, her eyes wide. "Your world sounds alive," she said. Ethan smiled faintly. "It was," he answered, "until we killed it." The sadness in his voice struck her heart like a blade. That night, when the temperature dropped and the desert wind howled again, Asharon found herself unable to sleep. Her body still ached, but her thoughts hurt more. She remembered her tribe, the faces of those who smiled as they buried her, the priest who said it was mercy, her own sister's trembling hands pouring sand over her chest. Her eyes burned with anger, and her hands clenched into fists. Ethan noticed. He moved closer, his voice low. "You don't have to tell me what happened," he said, "but you should know whatever they did. It's over now." She turned to him, her eyes glowing faintly. "It's not over," she whispered. "They're still alive, Ethan looked at her for a long time. He didn't answer, but he understood. Over the next few days, Asherin began to heal. Ethan helped her strengthen her body, teaching her how to walk again with support from an old metal frame he built. He called it a walker, and though it was heavy, she was grateful. Each step hurt, but each one reminded her she was still alive. "You're stubborn," Ethan said with a smirk as she tried to walk across the small room. "So are you," she replied, surprising herself by smiling for the first time in years. Their days fell into rhythm repairs, food, silence, small talk, laughter that felt strange but comforting. A bond began to form between them, fragile yet real. Ethan never treated her like a burden. He taught her small things, how to read human letters, how to fix small circuits. She learned fast. And sometimes when she looked at him, something inside her chest felt warm, unfamiliar, and dangerous. But every night, when Ethan slept, Asherin sat by the window, watching the cold moons rise. The pain of betrayal still burned deep inside her. She replayed the moment they left her screaming under the sand. She remembered the words of her sister, "Forgive us, Asha. It's for the good of the tribe." Those words haunted her dreams. One evening, Ethan found her sitting outside, staring at the dunes. "You're thinking about them again," he said. She didn't deny it. "They called it mercy," she murmured. "They said I was cursed, that my eyes saw too much truth. So they silenced me." Ethan's fists tightened. "People fear what they don't understand," he said. "That's not mercy, that's cowardice." Asherin looked at him, her voice calm but cold. "If you had been there, would you have buried me too?" Ethan met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "No," he said, "I would have fought for you." The simplicity of his answer broke something inside her. She didn't speak again, but her heart began to change. For the first time, she believed there might be goodness left in this cruel universe. That night, she dreamed not of sand and death, but of light. She saw herself walking through fire, rising from the ground stronger than before. When she woke, Ethan was still asleep beside the lamp, and she whispered softly, "Thank you, human." She didn't yet know that his mercy, the same mercy her people had called weakness, would one day become the weapon that would make her enemies tremble. Days turned into weeks, and Asherin's strength slowly returned. Her skin healed, her voice grew steadier, and the fire inside her heart burned brighter than ever. Ethan watched her every day, amazed at how quickly she adapted. She studied everything he taught, how to use human tools, how to repair old machines, how to control the energy pulse that flowed through her alien veins. But he could see something else growing in her too, something darker. Whenever she looked toward the horizon where her tribe once lived, her eyes hardened. He knew that the scars on her body were nothing compared to the ones buried deep inside her soul. Ethan tried to keep her busy. He showed her how to rebuild the old war exosuit he'd found years ago in the wreckage of a fallen human mech. "It's old tech," he said, "but strong." Asherin studied the design with fascination. She learned how to weld, how to connect the energy cells, and how to balance the frame. With each spark of the plasma torch, she felt power returning to her hands. "Why do you still keep this old junk?" she asked one evening. Ethan smiled faintly. "Because sometimes old things just need the right reason to rise again." At night, while Ethan slept, Asherin would sit by the glow of the dying fire. Her thoughts were a storm. She remembered her mother's eyes filled with fear, her sister's trembling hands, the sound of sand falling over her face. Her heart screamed for justice. But another voice whispered, Ethan's voice, "Mercy isn't weakness." She didn't understand it yet. For her, mercy had always been the word they used to kill her softly. One evening, as the twin suns set, Asherin stood before the mirror made from a polished metal plate. The exosuit, though unfinished, shimmered under the dim light. It wasn't just armor. It was rebirth. She ran her hand along the steel plates, feeling her reflection split between two selves, the woman who had begged for life under the sand and the one who now stood ready to face death without fear. She looked down at her legs, now supported by the powered braces Ethan built. The metal hummed faintly with her energy. Glowing with faint blue light, Ethan entered quietly. "You shouldn't push yourself this hard," he said. "You're still healing," Asharin turned, her expression unreadable. "Healing?" She repeated softly. "No, Ethan." "I'm remembering." He didn't answer. He just nodded. Because he saw it in her eyes. Something unstoppable was waking up. Later that night, she approached him as he worked on the hovercraft's control board. "Ethan," she said, "do you believe in vengeance?" He paused, looking up at her. "I believe in justice," he said. "But vengeance?" He sighed. "Vengeance doesn't give back what you lost." Asharin crossed her arms. "Then maybe it takes what was stolen." Her tone was cold, but her eyes glowed with emotion. Ethan stood and placed his hand on her shoulder. "If you go down that road, you might not come back," he warned gently. "I already didn't," she replied, her voice trembling like steel under fire. The next day, Asherin tested the suit. The desert winds howled as she walked beyond the shelter. Her steps were heavy but steady. Each movement released bursts of faint energy, sending ripples across the sand. Ethan watched from a distance, worried but proud. "You're not human," he whispered to himself. "You're something else." She raised her arms, and light flowed through her veins. Her heartbeat synchronized with the humming core inside her chest plate. It was as if the machine had fused with her spirit. That night, when the desert turned silver under the moons, she stood on the ridge, gazing toward the dark outline of her old village. The memories came back sharper than ever the screams. "The silence, the burial. They buried me once," she whispered to the wind. "But this time I'll return the favor." Ethan appeared behind her, silent as the sand. "If you go," he said, "you'll start a war." Asharin turned her head slightly. "They already did," she said. "When they called my death mercy." Ethan wanted to stop her, but he couldn't. He knew what it meant to lose everything. He had buried comrades, friends, even hope. So instead, he said quietly, "If you must go, don't forget who pulled you from the sand." Her gaze softened for a moment. "I won't," she said. "Your mercy gave me life. Now I'll use it to make them remember mine." As she walked away, the blue lights of her suit cut through the darkness like a moving star. Ethan watched until she vanished into the dunes. He felt fear, pride, and sorrow all at once. In that moment, he realized that his act of kindness had created something powerful, something neither human nor alien, something that would shake the world awake. The wind rose again, carrying her name across the barren plains of Varela, and somewhere far beyond the horizon, the tribe that had buried her alive felt the first tremor of their coming reckoning. The girl they had abandoned was no longer a victim. She was a storm waiting to break. The twin moons hung low in the violet sky as Asherin crossed the dunes. Her exosuit whispered with every step, the glow beneath her feet leaving trails of blue light in the sand. The desert that had once been her grave was now her ally. Cold and silent, she moved like a ghost reborn. Guided by pain and memory, her tribe's camp lay beyond the canyon, hidden among stone ridges and towers of bone-white rock. They thought her body had turned to dust long ago, but tonight the dead would walk again. She stopped at the edge of a cliff and looked down at the fires below. Her people were feasting, laughing, living as if they had not buried her with their own hands. She saw her sister, Sarai, dressed in the robes of a leader. Smiling as she raised a cup to the sky, rage burned inside Asharin like molten metal. Her fingers curled, and faint sparks ran along her arms. The suit hummed in response to her pulse, waiting for her command. But before she moved, she remembered Ethan's words. Mercy isn't weakness. His voice flickered in her mind like a dying flame. It made her pause, but only for a breath down below. 2 guards patrolled near the entrance. Asharan stepped from the cliff silently, the exosuit absorbing the impact. In one swift motion, she struck, her energy blade flashing blue. The first guard fell without a sound. The second tried to scream, but her hand covered his mouth. Her eyes glowed fiercely as she whispered, "Do you remember me?" He didn't have time to answer. She moved through the camp like a shadow, each step a memory, each strike a heartbeat. The fear spread slowly and wildly as tents caught fire and energy sparks lit the night. The tribe awoke in panic, seeing a glowing figure among the flames. They thought it was a spirit, a ghost of the cursed girl they buried. "The sandwich has returned," someone screamed. Asharan's voice cut through the chaos. Calm and deadly. "No witch," she said. "Only the truth you tried to bury." Sarai stumbled out of her tent, her face pale. She froze when she saw the figure before her sister, alive and burning with fury. "Asha!" "It can't be," she whispered. Asharan took a step forward, her voice low. "You called it mercy," she said. "You buried me to save yourselves." Sarai's lips trembled. "You were cursed," she pleaded. "Your visions, your eyes, they were not natural." Asharan laughed bitterly. "You feared truth, so you chose lies." As she raised her hand, a flash of light burst from her palm, striking the ground between them. The shock wave knocked Sarai backward. "I could end this now," Asharan said, her voice trembling. "But that would make me like you." Sarai's eyes widened. "Then what do you want?" She cried. "Justice," Asharan whispered. "And remembrance." From the ridge above, Ethan watched through his scope. He had followed her despite his promise not to interfere. He saw the fires spread, the figures running in panic, and Asharan standing in the center like a goddess of vengeance. His chest tightened with both fear and awe. He whispered to himself, "Don't lose yourself, Asha." But deep down, he knew this moment was hers. As the night burned, Asharan turned to her people. "You buried truth and called it peace," she said. "You buried me and called it mercy, but mercy lives." Her armor flared with light, sending a shockwave that shook the camp. When the dust settled, the tribe knelt, trembling. The fires dimmed, leaving only silence and the sound of wind. She looked around at the faces, some terrified, some ashamed. "Leave this place," she commanded. "Bury your fear instead of your daughters." Sarai crawled to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Sister, forgive me," she begged. Asharan looked down at her, the firelight reflecting in her eyes. "I already did," she said softly. "The day I chose to live." Then she turned away, letting the wind scatter the ashes of her past. As dawn broke, Asharan climbed back to the ridge. Ethan met her there, his face covered in dust. "It's done?" he asked quietly. She nodded, her voice tired. "They won't forget." Ethan looked at her carefully. "And you?" She hesitated, gazing at the rising suns. "I don't know who I am now," she said. "The one who was buried is gone, and the one who rose. She's still searching." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then maybe it's time to stop looking backward," he said. "The past buried you, but it doesn't own you." She looked at him and smiled faintly. "You sound like a priest," Ethan chuckled. "Just a man who's seen too much death." Together, they walked toward the horizon, leaving the burning camp behind. The wind carried the scent of smoke and freedom. For the first time, Asharan felt light, not the cruel light of the suns that had watched her die, but the soft light of a new beginning. Yet deep within her, She knew the storm wasn't over. Mercy had saved her. Vengeance had changed her. But destiny still waited beyond the desert. Somewhere in the stars, the sons of Virella rose slow and crimson. Their light spilling over the dunes like blood. Asharan stood at the edge of the canyon, watching smoke rise from what was once her tribe's camp. Her armor no longer gleamed, its surface cracked and darkened by battle. The energy in her veins pulsed faintly. Slower now, like a fading heartbeat, Ethan stood beside her in silence. His arms crossed, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Neither spoke for a long time. The wind carried only the soft hiss of shifting sand and the quiet echo of what they had done. "It's over," Ethan finally said, his voice low. Asharan shook her head. "No, not over," she whispered. "Nothing ends with vengeance. It only changes shape." She turned to him, her expression weary. "You were right, Ethan. Mercy isn't weakness, it's strength. But it took me too long to understand." Her voice trembled as she spoke, the memory of her sister's face, wet with tears, haunted her mind. She had spared Sarai. But mercy had not brought peace. It had only left her with questions that burned deeper than rage. They returned to Ethan's outpost as night fell. The journey was quiet. Asharan no longer carried the fire of revenge, only the ashes of it. Ethan repaired the hovercraft while she sat by the lamp, tracing her fingers over the insignia he had carved into her armor. It was a small emblem, the old symbol of the Earth colonies. "Why do you keep this?" she asked softly. Ethan smiled faintly. "Because it reminds me that humans can still stand for something good." She looked at it again. The curve of the star, the circle of light. And for the first time, she saw beauty in something human. Days passed, and the desert grew calm again. Ethan continued to work on his machines, fixing, building, always staying busy. Asharan helped where she could, but her mind wandered. Sometimes she would climb the ridge and stare at the stars, imagining what lay beyond. She thought about her people, what remained of them, and the strange irony that it took a human, a creature her kind once despised, to show her what true mercy meant. One night, she found Ethan sitting outside, his eyes following a distant shooting star. "Do you ever think about leaving this place?" she asked. He chuckled softly. "Every day," he said. "But leaving and belonging aren't the same. Out there, there's nothing waiting for me." She sat beside him. "Maybe we both don't belong anywhere," she said. Ethan looked at her, his expression gentle. "Or maybe we belong wherever we choose to stop running." Asharan smiled faintly. "You humans always find a way to make pain sound poetic." Ethan laughed quietly. "We had to. Pain was all we had left, for a moment." The silence between them felt different, not heavy, not empty, but alive. They watched the stars together. Two souls from different worlds, both scarred yet still breathing. The next morning, Asharan stood by the hovercraft, her armor repaired and polished. "You're leaving," Ethan said. Not as a question, but as a truth. She nodded. "There's a shipyard north of the ridge, old and broken, but I can fix it. There's more out there, Ethan, more like me. Lost and buried." He nodded slowly. "Then they'll need someone like you." Before she climbed aboard, she turned to him and placed her hand over his heart. "You gave me back my life," she said softly. "Your mercy was my strength. And now it will be theirs too." Ethan looked at her with quiet pride. "Then make it count," he said. "Make it mean something," she smiled, and for the first time, the light in her eyes was not fury. It was hope. As the hovercraft rose into the desert sky, Ethan watched until it became a glimmer against the morning light. He whispered to himself, "Good luck, Asha," and turned back toward his lonely outpost. The desert wind brushed his face, carrying with it a faint echo of her voice. Far above the dunes, Asharan looked down at the world that had once buried her. The scars of vengeance still marked her soul, but her heart carried something greater, now a piece of humanity. Fragile yet unbreakable, she touched the insignia on her chest. Ethan's symbol, her promise. The stars stretched endlessly before her, vast and silent, but this time she wasn't afraid. Mercy had saved her. Vengeance had changed her, and now purpose would guide her. She whispered into the vastness of space, "I am not the forgotten girl anymore." And the ship vanished into the light of dawn.